What's up, heathens? How ya doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Tonight, we're going to be taking a look at a self-described evangelist calling it in from his car and trying to prove to us that God definitely does exist. He has 4 different things that apparently prove God's existence, and we're all just, stupid for, I guess, not accepting his evidence. I don't know. We'll find out what his 4 pieces of evidence for God are, and if you want to fuck around and find out with me, then please stay tuned. All right, so here's our guy. He's all set up in his car and everything like that. But this guy is interesting, I'll say. And hopefully I don't get dinged for the music that he's got on in the background. I don't think that his music dinged us, or dinged him rather.
Hello, our legacy family. Welcome once again to Witness in a Minute, where the goal is to provide you the tools and encouragement to carry out the Great Commission.
Years ago, I had this whole minute in atheism thing that I was doing. I tried it out for a little bit. It ended up not really working all that well, and so I'd stopped doing it. But people often commented how sometimes the videos were more than a minute long. This is another example of that. It's 3 minutes long, an apologist in a minute, or evangelism in a minute, or whatever. But in any case, he's got some bouncing music, that's for sure.
Often, when you're trying to bring up spiritual matters to a lost person, they will tell you that they don't believe that God exists.
You know, I really don't like being characterized as a lost person. Like, I'm at my house, like, I know I've got a very good sense of myself. I'm not lost. I get that they think that we're lost because, you know, we don't believe in God or whatever. I feel like characterizing me as a lost person is pushing a lot of shit on me that's just simply not there. I'm not fucking lost. Quit describing me as being lost. And yeah, these quote unquote lost people that he's considering are the ones that don't believe in his particular God.
So naturally, they ask if we can prove there is a God. Of course we can. It's easy.
Oh, I'm so glad. I mean, it's easy, right? So we should easily be able to prove that God exists, which is kind of contrary to, you know, all of these philosophers and hundreds of years of attempting to prove that God exists through various inelegant and unfalsifiable methods. But sure, it's fucking easy to prove that God exists. Oh yeah.
We covered this in a past episode, but it's so important, I want to bring it up again. You might even want to take a few notes.
I'm going to have to find this past episode because this little 3-minute thing is just not fulfilling for me.
The basic proof for God has 4 points. 1, creation, 2, design, 3, art, and 4, order.
So, creation, design, art, and then order. I feel like the first 3 are just the same thing. Like, I'm not sure what he means by order. Order could factor, I mean, that could just be the same thing as like design, but like, I feel like creation, design, and order, they're all just the exact same thing. Let's see if he goes on to explain how all of those things prove it, because creation doesn't prove God whatsoever. We have natural explanations for that. Design, the argument from design is one of the worst arguments you can use, because just because something looks designed doesn't mean that it is designed. Just because you think a flower looks designed doesn't necessarily mean that it has to have a designer. We know how the flora and fauna have changed over time. We have fossilized records of this change. It doesn't really make sense to say that designed things must have been designed by God if they were in fact created by nature or come about through nature or naturally. And then you got art, which I'm kind of like, what the fuck? How does art prove God? I don't know how art proves God. I'm guessing it factors into the whole painting has a painter kind of thing, which is the design argument. He's really just got the 2 arguments, the order and the design, again, the order might factor into design.
When you look around the universe, what do you see?
Well, I mean, when I look around at the universe, I just see a whole bunch of places that don't support life, and then we're the only one that does support life. It makes me think, if God is real and he definitely created this universe, why did he mostly make it dead and instead of full of life? Why is the earth, from all that we have perceived, to be the only place where life has arisen? God made an unimaginable amount of stuff in this universe, and trillions upon trillions of planets, but he just picks one lone motherfucker to have like living organisms on. Oh no, I'm talking about from like a Christian perspective there, hun, because it's very unlikely that we're the only living organisms in the universe. No, from the Christian perspective, the entire universe exists and it's all centered around us. Like, we're God's creation. It is a weird thing to think, honey.
You see creation, design, art, and order everywhere you look.
See, all of that is just like some kind of weird argument from design or cosmological argument. That's all this is. It's just, it's one of those two. I'm thinking the order factors into the design, because I bet you this is all just one argument right here. I've made trillions and trillions upon trillions of planets, but I put life on this one planet. Also, butt stuff is icky, so don't do it. I don't like it none. I don't want to see it, and I can see everything, okay?
If every other thing has a creator, a designer, an artist, and an order behind it, why wouldn't you think there's a creator, designer, artist, and order behind the universe?
Okay, well, good question to ask, although I feel that it's kind of a leading question here, that you're sort of begging the question by the way that you phrased it, but I'll answer it nonetheless. So we wouldn't think that if there were natural explanations for all of those things, like a natural explanation for the universe, for why the universe developed the way that it did, and all this other stuff. If we have natural explanations for it, then we don't need supernatural, magical explanations for things. And considering that every single thing in our past that we once attributed to God has turned out to actually be some kind of natural process that we either didn't understand at the time or whatever, that means that most likely anything new that we experience is actually a natural phenomenon that we just don't understand yet. It seems like the most likely conclusion is that the universe is natural things happen in it, and there's no need for magic to exist. There's no evidence that magic exists, so there's no need for a creator to fucking bewitch, twiggle the nose and, shit into existence, or in the Christian God's case, spread his asshole and fart it out. I really don't see the need for God to create the universe when it could have happened and been inflated. The inflation of the universe could have happened naturally. So that's why we wouldn't think that a creator's necessary for any of those things.
So clearly, the proof that something has a creator is the something itself.
Let's just analyze this fucking sentence real quick. Proof that something has a creator is the something itself. If there's no natural explanation for how whatever object you're talking about came into existence, then that would be evidence that some intelligence had to arrange matter in that specific way. So like a good example of this is like a car or an airplane or anything like that. Like, we don't have natural explanations that show how airplanes come into existence. We have natural explanations for like how birds came up, why birds can fly, how they do fly. Like, we have natural explanations for that kind of shit. We don't need a magical explanation for that. It's not simply the object itself, it's the object and its configuration, coupled with the fact that we don't have any natural explanations for how that object came into that particular configuration. So like a mountain, for instance, we have natural explanations for how mountains came to be. Therefore, we don't need a magical creator for it. We don't need some wizard in the sky to twiggle his nose and, I guess, wiggle his dick and create a mountain. We don't need that.
The earth and everything in it is the proof that there's an intelligent creator. You can easily see the complex systems within the creations of Earth to prove there's a creator.
Yeah, life on Earth is complex, But just because something is complex does not necessarily mean that it was like fashioned by an intelligence. He's got all these animals on the screen. We have natural explanations for how all of those animals came into their current morphological states, but also their genetic. We have explanations for their genetics. We got explanations for the environment that we're currently living in. There are natural explanations for these things. So we don't need a magical creator to create these things. He would also need to explain why we have a fossil record that shows how, like, for instance, whales right there actually came from land quadrupeds. They were on land and then they moved out into the water and then they moved further out and further out until they became whales and dolphins and other animals like that. So, like, you would need to be able to explain why we have that clear linear progression in, like, whales, but not only whales, but like horses. They've also got a clear linear progression from one morphological state to another. Did you know that crustaceans have developed 5 different times on this planet? Like, I don't know why in the sea, like, the crustaceans are just the best adapted body plan or style of organism, but they seem to consistently evolve into crustaceans. He wants to say, oh, this is so complex, therefore God had to do it. But the problem is that he has no way to explain all of the other incidental information surrounding all that. So just drawing a bubble and placing God in there and saying God did it is not an acceptable answer. It is not a sufficient answer to explain the information that we have.
Evolutionists would have you believe that Hawaiian Airlines was started after someone dumped a bunch of plastic and steel in the ocean, and one day a fully functioning Boeing 67 just washed up on the beach.
No, nobody thinks this. Nobody's making this argument. As I said before, if you have an object that's in a certain configuration and there's no natural explanation for how that configuration could have come into being, then it must have had some kind of intelligence put it in that configuration. This would be in line with other scientific kind of reasoning for things. It's not necessarily like only evolution. They always want to pin it on evolution, but this has little to do with evolution. In fact, his example there has nothing at all to do with evolution. I don't know why he's characterizing normal fucking people that accept evolution as a fact. I don't know why he's painting them in this ridiculous light, other than he just doesn't understand what evolution actually is. And so to him, it's like throwing a whole bunch of shit into water and then waiting for a turtle to arise.
We all know that's ridiculous. So again, the proof that your car has a designer is the color. Just like our bodies are proof there's a designer. It has been said that the intricacies of an eye is so complex and perfect design that it's plainly evidence that there was a designer.
No, the eye is actually evidence of evolution, because we actually have an instance of every developmental stage of the eye in existence now on the earth, and we could actually track its development. There's this famous demonstration by Richard Dawkins where he slowly changes an eye into the eye that we have now. And, you know, it slowly changed from like photosensitive cells grouping into a collection and then eventually moving into more of a concave sort of situation. And then the lens came over. And so we have evidence of all of these versions of eyes in the animal kingdom now. We can track how it developed. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense to be like, oh, well, the eye needed to have a creator. But we could track its progression back in time and see exactly how it developed. That's the natural explanation. Again, just like with the car that I believe he mentioned in this section, the car is not the evidence of a creator. It's the car in its current state, and then the fact that we don't have a natural explanation to explain that. Those are the two very important things, and he's leaving one of them out. So just because the eye exists doesn't mean that God has to. If we didn't have a natural explanation for how the eye developed, that could be an indication that God exists. But the fact that we do have a natural natural explanation for it means that it's not evidence of a magical creator. Also, you remember how I was mentioning the incidental things that are sort of encompassing all of these things that he's talking about, and to which he just draws a cloud and he says God did it on there. You have to be able to explain, like, why do people have such shitty vision on occasion? Why are some people colorblind? If God, in his particular God, in his theology, God is an all-knowing, perfect creator, right? If he were an engineer, he'd be the best engineer on the planet. If that's the case, why did he design the human eye to be so fallible? Why did he design the human eye as if it were molded by the environment that we exist in? If he designed it, why is it that sometimes people go blind, or people are born blind, or people are born colorblind? Why do we have to use glasses on occasion because our eyes are fucked up? Why do these things happen? These are the kinds of questions that Christians like a creationist, evangelist, I guess, what they'll say is that they'll just draw another bubble and say God did it for whatever reason. God did it. God did it. God did it. Well, that's the way that God wanted it. God did it. God did it. Over and over and over again, they just use God did it. This is a God of the gaps fallacy. You can't just plug God into here and expect that to be a satisfactory answer. A lot of creationists will sit there and tell you, well, there's a nature of the gaps, or a science of the gaps, or something like that. Where you just say, oh, well, we don't know now, but we'll know in the future, or something like that. But the problem is that has been the case throughout history, that, we don't understand this thing. And until we do understand it, it will remain mysterious to us. So it's not really a gap thing. It's saying, I don't know. And that's not providing an explanation like God did it. That's just saying we don't know yet. It's just that in the past, people have plugged in their own particular gods in order to explain these things.
Now, art in an art gallery is proof there was an artist. And if you see a beautiful sunset overlooking miles of ocean, who can deny that God is the artist?
I can, because God's not the artist. I can deny that sky right there has God as its creator, because what I see is just a natural effect of light being scattered across our atmosphere. The orange light, or the red and orange portions of the light spectrum are scattered more so than the other parts, and so we perceive it to look like this. Sometimes you get very beautiful, like, purples in there on occasion, different colors at different times of the day. While it is amazing and it does look beautiful to us, that doesn't necessarily mean that God did it. But like I said before, if you can explain it naturally with natural explanations, then you don't need a magical creator to, wave his wand at Wingardium Leviosa this shit. Like, you just don't need that.
The universe is also orderly. When you consider the constant force of gravity and the movement of the planets and stars, who can deny that the universe has order?
Order in what sense? Order in that a cause precedes an effect, or an order in that the physical laws of nature seem to be consistent? In our experience, the laws of physics remain consistent. It gets really wonky when you get close to black holes, and it gets really wonky when you get closer to the inflation of the universe. It's not orderly everywhere. It's not like every single place, the laws of physics stay intact. Like, we had to develop new forms of physics at various points throughout our history. And so I'm sure that there's shit that we don't know about right now. So it's hard for me to say, oh, there's order everywhere, unless you define what you mean by order. Do you mean by order that, like, gravity seems to work the exact same way everywhere we see it? Because, like, as far as like black holes go, that kind of throws this whole idea out entirely. These black holes have such a force of gravity that not even light can escape and stuff. The laws of physics seem to break down near the event horizon of a black hole. It really depends on what you mean. And if you're talking about just flatly in a generalized statement, no, I disagree with you. It doesn't seem ordered.
If you see 20 Coke cups in a row, you know that someone put them there in order.
He said, if you see 20 Coke cups I'm guessing that he means like Coca-Cola cups to hold soda. I mean, sure, more than likely, like there's not going to be any kind of natural process that would put those soda cups in order there. It's very unlikely that any kind of natural process would do that, but I don't see how this relates to like knowing that God exists. It seems like a non sequitur. Like I don't get it.
God proves he exists by the things he has created. Romans 1:19 and 20 says, they know the truth about God because he has made it obvious to them. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and the skies. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities.
I will never get why people don't have a problem with this verse. And I'll tell you why it grinds on me. Because the verse literally says that people can clearly see the invisible properties of God. How do you see invisible things? I can detect the wind. We can set up different things in order to detect the wind. You can feel the wind on your skin. But how do you, I cannot clearly see the wind. Like the actual, I can see things that the wind blows, but that's an effect of the wind, right? That's not like a quality, like an invisible quality of the wind. I just literally don't know why they don't see the problem with this verse. Also, it's a for the Bible tells me so kind of thing. Oh, the Bible tells you that God created everything, and so people should clearly be able to see that kind of shit, and it's all because the Bible says so? Okay.
He's eternal power and divine nature. So they have no excuse for not knowing God.
I mean, no, I have a good excuse for not knowing God, and that's because God is undetectable and his shit's not clearly seen. Even if it were invisible, we should be able to detect it in some way. Just like with the wind, I can detect the wind even if I can't see it. We can detect portions of the electromagnetic spectrum that are not in the visible spectrum. Like we have ways of detecting that kind of shit. We can't detect God? That's a good excuse. That's like not a non-excuse or something like that. That's a good excuse.
So come on, Legacy family, show them God is real as you keep showing up and showing out for God. And may God bless your next adventure as you witness in a minute.
I don't care how many Christians there are out there. I'm so glad you have your faith and all that other kind of stuff, I guess, as long as you don't try to push it on people or push it through the government or anything like that. I really don't care if you're religious or not. But the fact that you're religious is not going to prove to me that God exists. There have been plenty of religious people in the past with different gods than yours. So that's not going to convince me. You know what's going to convince me? Some kind of detectable proof of God. We should be able to detect a sumbitch like that, but guess what? We can't. It seems really weird to say, keep showing up and showing out. And especially, living in the United States, because it's like the Christians are like, yeah, let's show up and show out. We don't like the LGBTQ people. We don't like the government. We don't like democracy. We want God to rule over this place. We're going to show up and show out and show you the love of Christ by condemning you to hell, is what I hear from a lot of Christians now. You even got Marjorie Taylor dipshit who's trying to portray Christian nationalism as, a good thing that's gonna somehow prevent, deadly shootings or prevent various other things in this country. And it's just not gonna do that. You're gonna force everybody to be Christian? Fuck off. As far as a final thoughts for this video, he's brought up 4 different points that were really just one point, which is the argument from design. Basically, he thinks that the earth has a creator, and that explains everything that he needs to know. I just don't find that to be a very fulfilling answer, because it doesn't actually answer anything. It just draws a circle and places God in the middle of it and says God is the explanation for everything. And that doesn't really explain anything. And we've done that several times in our past. Like we once explained rain by God. We once explained lightning by God. We explained shit tons of things by just appealing to God. None of those things have ever panned out to actually be God. They've always been some natural process. So until religious people can connect God to nature, I don't see how they're really going to prove that God exists. And it's going to be a tough thing to prove that God is needed for nature to operate, because the whole point of nature is that it just operates like amorally, doesn't give a shit about living creatures or anything like that. Everything just sort of operates in the way that it does, and that's it. There's no personal thing to it or anything like that. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you're leaving out right now, I want you to know that I really appreciate you stopping by. Don't forget to go down below, leave us a comment after the stream ends, and be sure to share it out with your friends and everything like that. Make sure you smash that like button and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.